remembered. Ladies and gentlemen, the young man who made this film, William Friedkin.
Thanks, Dad. I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you to the Cinematheque for screening this beautiful print of the picture. I appreciate the work that the Cinematheque does, and I have to just share a little story with you that I told the folks last night. And that was after a few years when I came out here to make films from Chicago, I had the great good fortune of meeting Billy Wilder. You all know who Billy Wilder is. If you don't know, get the hell out of here. And Billy used to like to have lunch at Johnny Rockets in Beverly Hills. It was right across the street from his office. And I would go with him, I don't know, 2-3 times a week. And one afternoon we were having lunch at Johnny Rockets, and he said to me, you know, Bill, he said, you and I have something in common. And I thought, well, what in the hell is he talking? What could I have in common with him? He's one of the greatest directors who's ever lived. And I said, well, what would that be, Billy? And he said, we both want to make commercial films. We both want to make films that appeal to large audiences. So don't ever look for your films in the Cinematheque. So that was probably the one time in his life that he was ever wrong.
That's a fantastic story. It's so much I want to ask you about this, because I've loved this film for a long time, and you haven't talked about it a lot over the years.
It speaks for itself.
You've said many times that you don't go out looking for films; they come to you. How did this one come about? I mean, obviously, everyone here probably knows, but you don't. This is a remake of a wonderful French film from Henri Georges Clouzot called Wages of Fear, which I'm sure would highly recommend it. But how did this come to you?
Well, first of all, I've never thought of it as a remake. If you've ever seen the original film, you know that almost everything about it except the premise is different.
And speak purely technically.
But after I made The Exorcist, I spent several years just doing the foreign versions of The Exorcist. I hired the directors in Italy, France, Spain, Germany, wherever they did dubbing or subtitles. And I supervised all the foreign versions of The Exorcist for about 3 or 4 years. And I didn't know really what I wanted to do next as a film. And I was under no pressure to do anything. But I was in France, by the way, Fernando Rey, who was in the French Connection, supervised the Spanish version. The fellow who did Fellini's soundtracks, Mario Maldesi, did the Italian version, and the great director Bernhard Vicky did the German version. And there was a fellow named Etienne Perrier, a French director, who directed the French version. But they all sent me tapes of the voices of the people in those different countries, and I chose the cast just by the sound and their recommendations. And I was in France, and I met Henri Georges Clouzot, who was a great idol of mine, not only for The Wages of Fear, but Diabolique, which I think is one of the scariest films ever, perhaps the most frightening film I've ever seen. Have you ever seen the original Diabolique? If you haven't, get that. Anyway, I met Henri Georges Clouzot, and I felt a great kinship with him, and we started talking, and I said, you know, this story is so universal, La Salaire de la Pierre. And I said that it really is about the world situation today, where you have all of these different countries that hate each other, but they have to cooperate, otherwise they're all going to get blown up. And I thought that the film was a metaphor for that. And he said, well, why don't you do it? And it was interesting after dinner conversation, but then I thought about it for a while, and I thought it would be a really great idea. And I mentioned it to Wally Green, who worked with me at Walper, where we made documentaries, and Wally also wrote the screenplay for the great Sam Peckinpah film, The Wild Bunch. And so he and I got together and thought about ways that we could contemporize that story, and we came up with this. So that's basically, you know, a short version of how it came about.
And how intensive was the process? I mean, you know, working with the writer, which you do a lot, obviously. I mean, did the two of you just sort of sit down every day? Was it, you know, was he feeding you pages and you were giving him notes, or did he write a draft? And...
Yeah. First of all, we would talk out ideas, starting from page 1. And we decided to do the 3 prologues, which the original film didn't have, to show how these guys got to this out-of-the-way place. And we based it on current events of the time. A French banker who had swindled his bank and had to leave the country. And there was a New Jersey, he was actually a hitman that I knew. And you'll see his name on the film. His name was Jerry Murphy. And he was a hitman for the Irish mob in Queens. And he had actually participated in the robbery of the church that you see in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And this was a church where all of the contributions that had come in from the other churches in the area was sent to this church in Elizabeth, where they counted it and parceled it out as to need. And so there was an enormous payroll there. And Jerry Murphy, who was the guy who was the leader of the gang in the film, had actually robbed that church in that way. And I went back to the church and asked their permission to film there, and I didn't tell them that the guy doing it was the guy who did this. But I knew a lot of guys like that, and so I used his story and the story of the French banker. And then there was sort of the beginnings of terrorism going on in Jerusalem. And Wally and I decided to make 4 of the most unlikely possible guys the heroes of this story. People that you would find it impossible to root for. Like, you know, an Arab terrorist, a French swindler, a New York wheelman for the mob, and the 4th guy is kind of, you know, he's a hitman as well. And we decided to do a film about anti-heroes, and it's sort of the theme of all the films that I've tried to make, Josh, which is the thin line between good and evil. The evil and the goodness that's in everyone, and that it's a constant struggle for us, you know, for our better angels to prevail.